Welcome to Geeks and Grounds, a monthly game club where we play games and brew good conversation together. My name is Jenny Wyndham,
And I'm Joel Thomas.
and we are in the midst of a snow day. I'm so excited.
Anything can happen. Snow
Yeah,
days.
magical. Yeah, we here in Oregon always get our snow days after the winter holidays, which is always really fun for me. Although I think this is pretty dang close. We just finished
Mm,
the winter holidays.
yeah.
Sometimes we get our snow days in like March, which is very, very weird.
Yeah, definitely the closest since I've lived here. That's for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. What have you spent
I
today just doing with your snow day?
geez, we just sat around, got some good reading time in. I actually called one of my friends from
Yay.
back in the Midwest, and as we were chit-chatting, he's like, "Oh, we got a bunch of snow too." I was like, "Cool." I was like, "Yeah, the whole city kind of shut down yesterday. Like, let me show you what it looks like in
Oh,
Portland where the city shuts down." And I opened my front door, and like for those of you who are the uninitiated with it when it comes to like Portland snow, we get like a light dusting. Like I bet maybe half an inch to an inch of snow is actually on the ground on the roads, and it seems like, oh, that should be fine. But in addition to there being no city infrastructure for dealing with the snow, we get the freeze and thaw. So like we'll get a little drizzle, it freezes the snow, and you end up with ice that's like half an inch, a full inch thick, and then it can be like a week before you can leave your house. So I went out and I showed my buddy. I was like, "Oh, here's what it looks like for us," and he just started like laughing, like, "Silly Oregonian with your half inch of snow. Surely it's not that bad." It's like, well, if you don't get it, you don't get it, I guess.
yeah, it is and it isn't. I come from having lived in Alaska for a few years, and so it's like I do understand what quote unquote real snow can look like.
Hmm.
Where it's like I remember when I was a teacher up in Alaska, it's like you don't cancel school for snow ever. Like I don't think maybe once the entire time I was there, we had to cancel school for a snow day. And it was because it was just so dangerous, whiteout conditions. Like kids could get lost, because it was just so blizzardy. But other than that, pretty much nothing. Here, I mean, it was so funny and interesting on Friday when it hadn't even snowed yet. Everyone's like, get off of work early, go get your supplies, hunker down. And people were hunkering down on Friday before the storm even hit. And then on Saturday, it was just like the lightest of flurries that weren't sticking because it was like so cold that it wouldn't stick. Everything was so frozen. It just boop, just blew away, kind of like a winter tundra. And so it
Yeah,
was really funny because I was sitting there disappointed in the weatherman because I'm like,
right.
you promised me sticky snow that I could really do something with, and none of this is sticking.
It was like 7 inches of snowfall coming to Portland, and it's like, get out of here.
I know. I'm like, those 7 inches just like drifted away, and I don't know where they ended up, but none of it was in my neighborhood. We did get a lot
New.
of ice, though. We did get a lot of like hard packed sort of situation, but
Hmm. Hmm.
nothing to play with. Definitely
Yeah,
wouldn't want to throw a snowball of this stuff at anyone.
for sure. So for us, very chill time in the Thomas
Mhm.
household. How about you, Jenny? What's it been like for you?
Pretty much the same. Just I like being a slug. And it's like my favorite cozy slug moment. So I read books, hung out with Rosie, played some games. We'll talk about what I started playing, which I'm super stoked about. And really just relaxed, which was very
Oh,
nice. I do like I
great.
do like even if we don't get the snow itself, the fact that the entire city was on snow day felt like I could kind of relax, which is
That's so
one of
real.
those things that actually we're going to talk about a little bit today when we head to the pastry case, because the topic
Oh.
of the show, since gaming news, it's January, it's a little bit light, on things to really dig into. But I wanted to talk about gaming as a grown up and sort of the pressures or lack of pressures or what we
Mm.
feel playing games. And so for me, having the snow day was this excuse where I was like, I don't have to play games to for me like make content. I'm not going to play games for even Geeks and Grounds today. I'm going to have a free day for me and it's going to be so much fun. But
Oh, I love that.
I'm curious, what about like for you playing games as an adult? What has that been like compared to playing games as a kid?
I guess there are probably 2 things that really stand out as difference for me. 1, when I was a kid, I could hyperfixate on a game, sit down, and, like, 4.5, 5 hours later, it's like, "What do you mean time has passed?" Like, I've just been very much locked in, and I have a much harder time locking in now as an adult, like, maybe it's because like after so long sitting in a certain position my back gets tired, or so long with my eyes open and unblinking my eyes dry out, or maybe it's because I need more coffee or more snacks. It's like just have a much harder time settling into the rhythm of gaming now than I used to.
Mm,
Like I actually really miss that. Like that's the thing that like I most struggle with, I think, especially as a person who's now doing game things and trying to like stay up and stay connected and like keep pace with all that's going on. So I definitely miss that. So that's probably thing number 1.
mm.
Thing number 2 is maybe just more about the existential passing of time in general. Like
Yeah.
when I was a kid, it felt like I had all of eternity to play video games. So there was never a rush to like, oh, I gotta finish this one so I can get to the next one, or I gotta
Mm,
mainline the story on this because I don't have time to play it and also play the other thing. And as I get older, it's like, well, Joel, you only have so many years left on this dusty old earth, and so you gotta be really conscientious about how you spend your video game time and make sure that you're not wasting your time. And like that nagging pressure in the back of my head that like I never how many times did I rent Gex, the gecko for N64 as a kid? Probably a
yeah.
100 times. Like that idea never even would have crossed my mind that I need to be concerned about like trying to rush through a game and like getting just the story elements or whatever. But now as an adult, it's like
Mm.
there's so many things competing for time, and I feel like I have to be a lot more intentional when I choose a game and how I play through that game.
That's really the idea of wasting time, I think, is something that really sticks with me as you're talking, because I think in this grander scope, right? In the news, or when you talk to people who aren't in tune or familiar with video games, the whole idea of playing any video game is this waste of time. And then when we get into this niche of us playing games where it's this thing that's supposed to be fun, and this, like, you can play intentionally, but also there's this element of like, it's games, it's fun. Why not be silly and why not waste time? I guess
Mhm.
I'm trying to get it, like, there's this interesting negative connotation of wasting time when we're not playing something that we're like, oh, this is going to be a game that we're going to get something out of, or this is going to be a game that's game of the year contender, so it's worth playing, versus a game that's not, that's quote unquote wasting our time. And I find that really interesting because I feel it too, where
Mm.
I'm like, okay, well, if I only have so much time, I want to play the really good games, and I want to play the games that I like want to get something out of. And I wonder, how am I potentially missing out on some experiences, or just what am I missing in playing that way sometimes, because I very much feel that pressure too.
I think that's really real. Like you know, part of it is probably just like US culture and the way time is equated with money and things like
Mm,
that. Like I think in addition to just kind of the natural existential element of this, just like the appreciation of time as you get older as a thing, I think there's that like weird, well, it's a waste because you could be repairing those baseboards or you could be painting that spot on the wall that doesn't match the other parts of the wall. And I think like I think there's like that weird puritanical like you should be working all the time, all work and no play. You know what? That's just fine. That mindset. So yeah, I think you're right. Like I think there's something to this that like seeing fun as just as valuable as doing a home improvement project, or, you
Yeah.
know, earning money doing a thing. Like, maybe prioritizing fun is something that I just need to do a better job of.
Yeah, and fun, and I think for me specifically, I won't speak for you or anyone else listening to this, but prioritizing also being willing to try things that you may not enjoy or you
Mm,
find you may put down. I think that's one of the pressures I have for myself when I play games now that I'm like, a grown up with a day job that I have to like commit a certain amount of hours to every week.
mhm.
And, I want to maintain relationship with friends and family, and that's another big chunk of time. And so I try to make sure to play games where I'm like, I think it's gonna be worthwhile for me to play for whatever reason. And sometimes I wonder, like, what if I played a game that either I know I'm maybe not gonna totally resonate with, or maybe it's a game that's kind of hot garbage? Because I remember as a kid playing, especially it was all of the like super branded, like toy related games. I don't even know what to call them. They have a name. I just am blinking. But all of these games that have like IP, they're IP based games. They're not
Mm.
games made to be games inherently. They're games that like the Barbie games of our childhood, where it's like they're not good games. It's the High School Musical 3 Game Boy Advance games of our childhood. Hot garbage. Like definitely not good games, but I honestly loved jumping into those when I was a kid,
Hmm.
and I don't ever spend time with games that I'm, like, pretty sure I'm not gonna enjoy in sort of that, like, intellectual manner, and sometimes I'm like, "Maybe I should just let loose and play a game that I think is gonna be bad." Just kind of enjoy it sometimes.
Oh, that's so
But
interesting.
yeah, I also think we have less of those games in some way, because, like, at least in terms of IP games, I feel like we
Mhm.
don't get the Bratz games, we don't get the Barbie games, we don't get, again, High School Musical 3. We don't get as many of those anymore for I'm sure a variety of reasons that I don't necessarily know. Retro gamers probably have a lot of history and knowledge on this, but even just exploring games that maybe be unexpected to me. I think I go into a lot of, okay, is this a game that people have recommended? Is this a game that like I've seen curated in other places? Is this a game I've seen already on Twitter and I'm pretty sure I have an idea of like the
Mm.
developer's intentions? And I think I tend to overthink things a lot more than when I was a kid.
The bar, I mean, the risk reward ratio is flipped. Like, as a kid,
Mhm.
well, I mean, I can't speak for most households, but like, we didn't get to buy very many games. We couldn't afford it, but we would like rent a game every
Yep.
couple of weeks. And so it was like, oh, well, I'm going to pay $5 and I'll have this game for a week and I'm going to play it till the wheels fall off. And so, like, there wasn't that risk that we have today where it's like, well, no, you have to buy the game and then download it. Like, I guess Redbox exists, but I've never used it. So maybe I'm just missing out on something here. But yeah, I
Yeah.
think there's more risk when you go on to take a game in now than there used to be. So yeah, I think there's
Mhm.
something, I just feel like there's more weight behind video games than there used to be. Like, I feel like as a kid,
Yeah.
there's just a lot more freeform fun time.
Yeah. And I think there are subscription services that are bringing back some of that. And admittedly, I am subscribed to one of those, the Xbox Game Pass.
Hmm.
I need to use it more. I was really good about it for a stint and then I've kind of fallen off it and I want to get back into using it, where it's like for Xbox Game Pass, you pay a subscription fee and you get access to all of these a huge number of games that you can just play as long as they're in the library, and it kind of brings back that rental feeling of like, you know what, let's just try it, let's just do it. And so yeah, maybe I just have to jump back into that. Just as a heads up, Xbox does not sponsor this podcast, but if they ever wanted to, I would absolutely be down to talk with them.
Well, can I
Um,
ask you, because I don't have Game Pass, and so like this,
yeah.
the I'm curious about um mindset shifts. So like, think about like when you're a
Mm-hmm.
kid, you go to Blockbuster or wherever your local video game thing is, you rent a game. That is the only game that you really have to play, except for whatever games you happen to already own, for a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to be playing it. And is there something where it's like, because you have an almost infinite amount of games that you can play, that it actually makes it harder to like lock in and like really like go through a game in the same way that you did when you were a kid?
Mhm. I think so. At least for me, I feel like the finite amount of games I had as a kid really did get me to when we rented a game, like really enjoy and really be able to pick and like well, and also you had a finite amount of games to pick from at the rental store.
Right. Yeah.
And playing and using Xbox Game Pass has been really fun because you have so much choice. But in that, because of I think just the personal decision fatigue I feel every day when I'm going through even my Steam library, honestly. So it's like, well, I feel like I have too many games on my Steam library. Let's go to Xbox Game Pass and try something new out. Oh my gosh, here's another couple hundred games. Maybe I will just turn on Netflix instead. But gosh darn it, there's another couple hundred movies to pick from. So I think there is a degree of there's a lot we are just oversaturated with choice in a lot of ways.
Mm,
Um, honestly, it's kind of nice, for example, that we have Geeks and Grounds because I'm like, I know one game I'm playing every month.
that's right.
That's
I feel the
easy. It's really
exact same way.
it's
It's like it
real
removes a
nice.
mental burden. And I was
Um,
it's like it's the difference between like getting into a car and having a CD wallet and having
yeah.
Spotify at your fingertips. Like
Could you
the
explain
way
to the younger generations what a CD wallet is?
Okay, so, you would buy a few CDs, like physical CDs at the store or whatever, and I'm not to, like, talk down to anyone here, like, I think y'all get
No.
the general idea, but, like, there was that conversation that whenever a friend was in your car with you that you would have to have, where it's like, what CD singular do you want to listen to? And unless you had already burned, like copied and made a CD that had like 12 random songs on it, you were listening to a whole album by one artist. And so like it in a similar way, it's like the way we consume music has fundamentally changed because at any point I
Mm,
can just click like, give me Janelle Monae's top hits, and I just click the thing and let it run. And that's just such a different thing than like I am anchoring on the Dirty Computer album, and I'm just gonna like just settle into that for a long time. And so I
yeah.
yeah, I wonder if something similar has happened with video games to that in that way. It's just like it's hard to really settle in. At least for me, it's hard to settle into games the way I used to.
Yeah, and I think this also goes into just like types of player you may be because I could definitely see if someone who is listening to this is a type of player who, like my partner, settles into one game and will play
Mm,
that game for hundreds of hours, like really just absolutely master every skill within that game and just be really good at it. I think that problem is maybe not as a parent or maybe not even quite there to the extent it is for someone like me. I think I tend to be a person who I also know I tend to be a person who gets through media more quickly. Like I go through books relatively quickly. Music, I also tend to hyper focus on a song and like a track or an artist, and then I hop to another one and I like
mm.
hyper focus into these short stints. I think
Yeah.
games I play kind of similarly, where I'll like hone in really hard on the game and then I hop to another one in relatively quick fashion. And so I think for me, my type of play as well, that's maybe making it more inclined for all of this to kind of be this beautiful lining up of the planets to make for an interesting gameplay experience as an adult.
I love that. And I think you're totally right. And I'm curious, like, because I just wonder at what point my approach to game style changed. Like, is it when I got a real
Mm,
job, and I don't know if it like changes your brain somehow that the way you think about the value of your time changes or something. I don't know. I would love to hear from the community too on this, just like how your experience with games have changed since you were a kid. Cause I feel like there's a lot
yeah.
to explore here. And I think, we have a lot of like millennial listeners and people in the community, but I also know we have a lot of like younger people as well. And I'm really curious to see
Hmm.
the difference in experiences between those groups.
Yeah, and we have a few folks who are like even above the millennial bracket, Gen X
Right?
and
Yeah.
beyond. So yeah, anyone who would like to provide feedback on that, send an email to Jenny at Geeks and Grounds. You can leave a voicemail. I can't remember if I remembered to say this last time, but you can also leave a voicemail for us that we can play on the episode. And that's sayhi.chat/geeks and grounds. You just leave us that voicemail and we'll play it in the next episode if you want to do that.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so that's the topic of the show. I guess any last thoughts before we move on to just what you've just been engaging with this last week?
No, I don't think so. I'm
Yeah.
eager to see how my experience is so specific to just me, and I'm curious to see if there are any thematic things that we can look at as the community starts chatting.
I agree. Okay. Speaking of millennials and Gen X and those generations, I have been okay. For folks who may not know, I am a very big Survivor fan. I think it's one of the best reality shows ever made. Um, there's a small part of me that wants to do a Survivor podcast. Unironically, I love this show. I think also Jeff Probst may be an energy vampire because he has not aged, and I'm pretty sure he is like sucking the energy and souls of every contestant as he like uh basically distinguishes their torch. But that I'll save that for the podcast.
That
I
should be
love
your fan
Survivor.
fiction. Absolutely. You need to
The
write this story. Put it on
the What Remains
AO3.
in the Shadows Survivor
Oh
crossover you
my
never thought you
god.
needed.
Yes.
Um I love
Please.
Survivor, just to put it mildly. And I have not seen all of the seasons. This love of Survivor started when I was in like middle school when it came out into the world. Season 1, watched it. Didn't have TV for the longest time when I was in college, so I just didn't watch TV in general. And now
Mhm.
that we have TV and like all of these networks that we can sub to, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have access to Survivor. Let's catch up. There's like 45, 46 seasons.
It's insane.
It's a long running
Incredible that
show.
they can do that.
So I watched season 33 over this last week.
Mhm.
Gen X versus millennials. And I think if anyone were to watch Survivor, this is probably one of the strongest seasons to watch. I don't know if it would be the first season I would recommend because there is some extremely high level gameplay that absolutely blew my mind. But as a fan of Survivor, watching this season, I will say I respected the heck out of pretty much every single player in the game, and the love that they had for the game was so apparent, and that's what made it extremely fun for me to watch. It was
Oh,
a season of twists and turns. It was so good. Oh, it was awesome. So I had a blast. Have you ever watched
that sounds
Survivor,
incredible.
Joel? Like have like
I
intensely watched it?
okay, so intensely. I think I was 15 when the first season of Survivor came out. I was really into it. Season 2 was my favorite. Ethan's like the soccer player, and Rupert, just like such cool people. And I was really into it. And then same thing. I went away to college and didn't have access to TV, so I didn't watch it again until I think in 2020 in COVID, one of the Survivor series seasons hit Netflix, and you texted me and are like, "This season just hit Netflix. You have to watch it." And so I did, and I really really enjoyed it. But where the Survivor that I am most intensely engaged with is on Dropout, the comedy college humor sub app that came out. They did a 2 episode run where their cast of improv comedians played Survivor over the course of a couple of episodes, and it is one of my absolute favorite Survivor incarnations because they don't know when they show up to set that they're going to be playing Survivor for the next 2 days. And some of them know the show well, some of them have never seen it. And it's hilarious. It hits all the high notes, but in 2 episodes. So, would recommend.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
you've already
I
found the link.
actually I already dropped the link into the show notes so folks can have it. I very side tangent. I just subscribed to Dropout. And uh first of all, there's a show which I'll put in actually called Very Important Person, I think.
People.
Very Important People,
Yes.
which is absolutely hilarious. It's just an improv show where the premise is you have this sort of interviewer and then a comedian that they bring on to interview. But before the comedian goes out to get interviewed, they get put into a totally different persona. Like they get full makeup, full costume, and they get transformed into a character. So they're not doing the interview as themselves, they're doing the interview as the character. I've only seen the first two. I saw there was a third episode that just dropped. The first two were so good. I was in awe at how amazing everyone is at improv. I'm like so sharp, so quick-witted, and I could not believe that this was just comedians being themselves, just in terms of how amazing they are at just being on the spot. I was in shock. It was so good.
You have stumbled upon one of my hyperfixations right now. All things drop out, and the third episode is the best so far. It gets absolutely unhinged. I could talk about, like, I know that every week we have pastry case and we like talk about the things that we're into, and every now and again I'll reference a dropout thing, but I could honestly I could reference a dropout thing every single week, and I don't, because I feel like people will get tired of it. But if you're interested, dropout is like $6 a month or something like that. They have a lot of really great shows. If you're a D&D person, Dimension 20 is incredible. Game Changer is a show that like Taskmaster was based off of. Like every episode is a different game show. Like the Survivor episode, like is it one of those
Mm-hmm.
episodes? It's such a fantastic app, and because it was started by a company, uh, or by like a single person, they at the start of this last year just split up all their profits among cast and crew. So like
Wow.
it doesn't have the feeling of like a Netflix or a Prime where it's like I'm giving money to this huge multi-million dollar entity. It's like, oh, like
Mhm.
these are real people, and I mean they live in LA, so they're probably making more than me, but it feels like you're watching real people doing things, and it's just entertaining and funny, and yeah, could not talk highly enough about this app and the shows on it.
Yeah, well, and I remember you mentioning there's, one of the D20 seasons, like, the Warren one? The
Burroughs
Rabbits
End, yeah.
Warren? Or yeah, Burrow's End. I think you were mentioning that was one that was relatively highly recommended, if I think that was you maybe. I don't talk about D20 with any is it D20? I don't
It was
talk about.
definitely me.
Yeah. So, I was like, I've never watched it, but you and a few other folks have been referencing that show so much. I was like, you know what? I just canceled a bunch of like subscription services that, I wasn't watching the shows on there anymore because the seasons were done. So why not take some of that, put it into a new subscription service, see if I can find some cool shows to watch. So I'm excited to dive in.
Well, I'm going to just save everyone podcast ears for like 5 minutes here and just say, I'm going to text you after our episode today with like a million recommendations. I'm so
Yes.
excited. Welcome to the family.
Yes. Oh, I'm so excited. Finally, it's here.
So what
um
else have you been getting into?
Playing Lethal Company. We even had a G&G hangout where a few of us from the community all got together and played Lethal Company, earned money for the company, and it was very fun. We died a lot. Lethal Company is a multiplayer online game where basically you play as anonymous space workers for a company corporation that does not care about your well-being. So basically it's capitalism, and you go out into these scary moon mines and you try to pick up junk for the company to trade back for money, and in those mines you can encounter many things all trying to kill you, and it's very fun. And so yeah, I've been playing just lobbies with a few friends, like again folks from the G&G community, just so it's been very fun to play that, especially as I don't often play multiplayer games. It's not something I personally gravitate to, so it's kind of neat to
Hmm.
just have one that I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of fun. um but the last thing, and then I'll let you share what you've been playing, watching, reading. I last week talked about how I finished Undertale. Like every winter holiday, I play Undertale. This December, a fan game called Undertale Yellow just launched.
What?
And in it, it is supposed to be a prequel to Undertale, detailing the story of one of the other six humans that fell down the mountain. I do know that this game came with some controversy about the music usage. Admittedly, I did not look into it too much, because by the time I had like even learned this game existed, I guess there's been a resolution. So like
Mm,
Toby Fox and all the lawyers and everyone was they've come to a resolution. So I'm not going to dwell on that because it seems like it's settled. I'm like all
sure.
I want to do is play it. Um, I'm just really excited because I did boot it up. I started it. It is maybe like it is uncanny how close it feels to being made by Toby Fox. I haven't gotten far enough to know the
Wow.
writing, see how solid it is, but I can tell you the vibes are immaculate. Um, it's very, very good so far. And I'm really excited to see the ways that they're going to imagine the world and how they're going to develop the lore from this fan perspective. And it's, yeah, I'm excited. I'm going to be talking about it more probably next week.
I'm so curious to hear more about this, and if you like it, like,
Hmm.
I'd love to play as a follow-up. That sounds so interesting. There's
Yeah.
something about, like, when, I guess, owners of an intellectual property, if you will, are generous with that property in a way that is, like,
Hmm.
supportive of the community that is behind it. And obviously, I don't know, like, anything about what's happened there with those,
Yeah.
parties, but, like, just the fact that it exists and hasn't gotten, like, completely taken down with, like, cease and desist stuff is, like, that's incredible to me.
Yeah. I think historically, and even in this case, Toby Fox generally is like, I want people to create stuff from this. I want people to be inspired by this. I want people to make games because they played this and they loved it so much they want to make a
Ugh.
game. And so I think again, I don't know the details of what happened with this. It had something to do with the music use.
Mhm.
But either way, I'm so happy that it exists. I love the Undertale universe, and so I'm just very stoked to play it. It's also free. So if anyone wants to dive in, talk about it with me in the Discord. It's free. I've just found it on gamejolt.com and it just look up Undertale Yellow and you will find it. So there's that.
That sounds so cool. Um, yeah, I love when people get to be creative. I love it, and I love when people support it, even at sometimes their own expense. Like, that's just great. I'm so excited about it.
Mhm. So what have you been up to?
My list for this week is all over the place. So I'm just gonna like rattle off a few of these things because I've referenced them before. Continuing with Akira, finished volume 2. I know that we got asked
Nice.
last time like differences between Akira, the story or like the manga experience and the movie experience. I can say
Mhm.
with confirmation now that the movie stops at the end of volume 2. Um,
Okay.
but they changed the ending drastically because obviously the story continues in the manga and the movie stops. So it's like they took a different ending, plugged it into the back end of like volume 2 and continued. I am loving it. The lore is deeper than I thought. Y'all know how I feel about the lore. So very much
Mhm,
enjoying it.
mhm, mhm.
Also, the finale of Monarch Legacy of Monsters hit this week. Again, this is like how did humans discover like Godzilla and the like Titan monsters in the current Godzilla verse, and
Mhm.
it's sassy. and fun and well written, and there's a character that you just absolutely hate that's kind of like a good guy and a bad guy at the same time. I don't know. Complex family drama. It's great. And like I say that as like a consumer of media, not as like a Godzilla person. Like it's just a great story, and I think anybody would enjoy it. Speaking of things anybody will enjoy. Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question. I'm curious. Remind me, did you see the new Godzilla movie?
-1? No, I,
Yes.
I
Okay.
haven't yet. So I've heard it's amazing.
Yeah, just this being in the Godzilla verse, I was curious if you had seen that.
No, it came out during like holiday travel times, and since coming back, I haven't had a chance to go. So definitely on my
Mhm.
list. Everyone's been raving about it. I'm gonna watch it. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah. All right, sorry to interrupt.
No, no, no,
Continue.
no. Something for everyone. Pokemon Concierge on Netflix is
Yes.
the best 4-episode television series ever created, and you will not be able to change my mind about this. It is stop
Wow.
motion Pokemon, uh, with, like you have, like, claymation type people, you have, like, very fuzzy, like, someone did, like what's the felt push pin felt model type things?
Mhm.
Some of the characters look like that, so, like, very soft and cozy looking, um,
Cute.
and the story is that a young woman who is burned out from her corporate job, uh, is feeling like highly anxious, goes to work at a Pokemon resort, and it's all about her learning how to deal with her anxiety, learning how to make friends and have fun, and then
Wow.
teaching the Pokemon that come and have anxiety how they can have fun. And
Oh my
it's just
god.
like it's a adorable to watch. The show hits like very like important thematic notes. It's incredible. Like I I could not recommend this more highly. Like it is one of the favorite my favorite things that I've watched in the last month.
You mentioned it last week as well that you had just started it, and I still have not watched it. I'm gonna watch it tonight. I feel like on a snowy
Yes.
evening, this is gonna be perfect. Now I have to ask,
Mm.
um, what was your favorite Pokemon, uh, represented in the show?
Well, here's the thing. My favorite Pokemon since childhood has been Psyduck and then Golduck. Like I have always loved them. And
Yes.
Psyduck is a central character in the story, like, helping Psyduck overcome his anxiety is a major plot point in the show. So, like, it's checking all my favorite boxes.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. Okay, I this may delve into spoiler territory, but are there any
Okay.
Oddish or Bulbasaur?
There are Bulbasaur. I don't remember there being
Yes.
Oddish, but there are other very cute plant-based Pokemon. It's cross-generation. So if you were
Ooh.
not a 150 kid, you will love this. If you are a 150 kid, you'll love this. It hits all the high notes for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I will watch this. You have spoken so highly of it. I couldn't avoid it. You know what I mean? I couldn't not watch it after hearing this glowing review. Best for arc for episode TV show of all time. That's
I
pretty
think
big.
so. I think it was only 4, and I think each episode's like 15 minutes, and it's just it's it will it will warm your heart on a snowy winter's eve.
Did they excuse me. Did they leave it open? Like, do you think they're going to continue with this? Does it
If
seem
they're
like something they'd
smart, they
continue?
will. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like a every episode is kind of a different theme that takes place on the island, and so it's like it has infinite expansion opportunities at this point, as far as I'm concerned.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, it's a matter of how much money do they want to print, I'm sure.
Right.
If we're talking
Exactly.
Pokemon and Nintendo and all of that.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so cool.
And then on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, I finished Marvel's What If season 2, and it was one of the worst seasons of television I have watched in a very long time.
Oh,
I
snap.
There was one episode where the story is essentially like Asgard falls apart, and so a woman who's like living in probably like the 1600s in like what is today America, So she's like a native person, encounters the power of Asgard and gets like superpowers. And she like the whole episode after she like learns this, like learns how to like use her powers, or whatever, is her stopping the Spanish colonization of the Americas. Like she literally like teleports to the throne of Spain to confront the monarch at the end. Like that episode was like, I can't believe Disney allowed this to air. It is incredible. And then
Mhm.
every other episode feels like the worst. I'm a big superhero fan. This was like the worst
You are.
superhero drivel I have ever experienced. Like I don't think I've ever seen a superhero cartoon with worse writing. It's just bad.
Wow.
It's
This
so
is
bad.
this is big because you are the resident superhero expert.
Oh, experts.
Historically, I am
Yes.
not a superhero fan. I'm really curious. So when a show like this happens and you're watching it and you're like, this is bad. I'm curious because I know I will do the same thing, but what compels you to keep watching? Because you finished the season.
Hmm.
What compelled you to finish the season?
So there were a couple things. One, they were going to be adapting Marvel 1602, which is one of my absolute favorite Neil Gaiman runs from the Marvel world, and
Mhm.
it was like episode 7, and it was terrible. It was an absolutely terrible adaptation. So I was like, in part, kind of hanging on for that because like I knew the episodes would kind of build. Um, but also like I want to know what the Easter eggs are. But what I will tell you is it is not worth it. If I would just like say you should, if you're interested, if you're a Marvel person and are on the fence, watch the episode. Like it's very clear from the thumbnails, like the native story. I think it's definitely worth your time. Do not
Mhm.
watch the rest of it. There's no way that the Easter eggs that could potentially come later make it worth watching something this bad. Like,
Wow.
and you all know I do not like shitting on other people's art and other people's creative endeavors, but because it's Marvel and it's a multi-billion-dollar industry owned by Disney, I feel like it's okay to punch up a little bit here and
It
say,
absolutely is okay.
considering the IP that they're working from, it was just unacceptably bad.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like at that level, they don't really have too much of an excuse to have it be well, I didn't watch it, but from what I'm hearing, they don't have an excuse to have it be that poorly done.
I don't think so, especially like the animation is this like really bad computer-based animation. And it's like, y'all, we have Star Wars anime now, and we know what it looks like. We have Arcane on Netflix. We know what this can look like. This ain't it. It ain't it.
Mm,
So yeah, I
mhm.
did not like it. Would not recommend. Happy to check. If any, get in the comments if you strongly disagree. I'd love to hear what you loved about it. And I will not to like disagree with you, but I'm just curious if you loved it, what you were
Or
into
to
about it.
disagree with you. It's okay to
Yeah,
disagree.
yeah, absolutely, 100%.
No,
And then
I
kind of
say
last thing
this
I'll
as
just
someone who's just not a fan.
Jenny's gonna get in the comments and argue with you about why it's bad, even though she hasn't seen it.
I have no
Um,
idea what I'm talking about right now.
Last thing I do want to call out is I finally got around to watching Saltburn, the big movie that's getting the Oscar buzz.
Mhm.
It was incredible. I mean, a million trigger warnings and content warnings based on the story, which you should definitely look up. But the story of obsession and social climbing and things like that, like it just checks a lot of really good boxes, and the writing's great, the acting's great. Could not recommend highly enough if you're looking for a movie to watch, like a very very good one.
Ooh, okay. Is this on I'm trying to look and see. Did you watch this on streaming or did you go to the theaters to watch it?
I think we rented it on Prime to watch it, as I recall.
Gotcha. Okay.
But it's in theaters now. Yeah, definitely like worth watching. I think Barry Cogan just won like some award, maybe for maybe at the Golden Globes for it. Like, it was
Dang.
great. I would absolutely recommend you all check it out.
Yeah, that's one that's been on my list to watch, and I just have not gotten to it yet for Well, no, not whatever reasons, because I was watching Survivor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's so bad. I watched Survivor and like just the conflict of just looking at sort of this sort of this colonialized perception of what tribal symbolism looks like, and it's just like that. There's that level, there's the metagame level, there's the Jeff Probst has gone to therapy, so it's really interesting to hear him speak now compared to some earlier seasons
Mm,
of. There's
mm,
just it's a lot. There's a lot to break down, but we'll save that for the Survivor podcast. uh
incredible.
Incredible. Notable releases this week. If you are a fan of indies and you're wanting to keep track, we like to just shout out some notable ones that we've been keeping track of. This is not a comprehensive list. It's January. It's a quiet week. The only one that really stood out to me as I was going through Steam was this game called Anomaly Agent. I actually played the Steam Next Fest demo for this when it came out, and I was surprised. This game was not one that I thought would hook me, but it did. I felt that the
Oh.
combat was really fluid. I felt like it was really responsive. As a not great dodger or parrier or anything, I felt like I was able to work the mechanics and feel cool doing so. And there's
Oh,
a
it
really
looks
neat sort of
cool.
yeah, it's got this cyberpunk feel to it. So Anomaly Agent's about basically you are it's pretty straightforward. You are an agent, there are anomalies in this cyberpunk universe, and you're going through and solving mysteries. I don't think was in the demo, but supposedly there is a factor of your decisions will have some impact on the story for good
Hmm.
or for ill. I don't know to what degree. I didn't play or encounter that in the demo that I played. But I just thought it was really stylish, and it does have like pixel art blood and gore. It felt very like there are scenes in it that felt very old boy light, where it's like you're going through these corridors and just punching out like all these
Ah.
enemies, and there's an element of that kind of cyberpunk cool that they
Mhm.
go for that I thought they captured really well. So yeah, I'm gonna probably get it just because I'm really intrigued to see where the story even goes. But this is one of those games that surprised me last year, and I'm excited that it's coming out in just a few days. January 20. Whoops, I lost the Steam page.
4th? 24th, I
January
think.
24th. Yep. So, yeah,
Very
that is
cool.
it for the pastry case. Again, for anyone who would like to let us know about your gaming experiences when you were younger compared to now, or if you have any feedback or comments on, I don't know, the Marvel show, feel free to email Jenny at geeksandgrounds.com or leave a voicemail at sayhi.chat/geeks and grounds. All right. So that takes us to this week's brew, I guess. And we have been playing OneShot together as a community for the last couple of weeks. It is really, we are in the thick of it. And so if you have not started the game, know that our discussion starts week 1 of a month and we continue it through. So we're going to be going from the tower, basically the end of the refuge, through the tower and through the start of Solstice. If you
Mhm.
haven't played through that, absolutely still listen. We talked about last week how this could kind of be like a nice primer so you can really know what to look out for as you play. But if you are someone who wants to wait because you really want to experience it for the first time fresh yourself, this is just your heads up. So,
Oh boy.
oh boy.
Oh
This
boy.
is going to be a big one. I feel like, whew.
Jenny got a very concerned text from me midweek this week, so there is gonna be a lot to discuss, and also for me, a little to discuss, and we're gonna get into that.
Well, okay, which I was meaning to text you, and then the snow honestly distracted me, um, because I think there wasn't as much to discuss, and I should. Well, we're gonna actually find out in real time soon
In real,
what
here we go,
happened.
y'all. This
Yeah.
is real shit right here.
This is real life. Um, let's just start where we ended last time, where we took a nap in the library. We had met George.
Mhm.
the wonderful librarian, and Nico, they they were basically like, "Hey, we got our library card. We need to go to the tower. We're almost there. Let's just take a nap. I'm sleepy. Sleepy eepy baby." And so you wake up and I think you're kind of just going straight to the tower at that point.
Yes, you go straight to the tower at that point.
Yep.
You do have a very sad moment of disconnect upon waking up. Uh,
Nope.
no?
Not nope. Well, hold on. In the
Tell me what
library,
you
we go to
got.
the tower. Well, okay, because I think you're
Oh, right,
ahead a
right.
little
Yeah, yeah,
bit.
yeah.
Because
Go ahead.
after the library, you go to the tower and there's that like giant X, right?
Yes.
I'm curious, was it very clear to you what you had to do when you saw that X?
Yeah, for me, it felt really clear. I don't know.
Yeah.
I just kind of was like, they've already set the precedent that I need to be engaging with the like computer desktop app throughout.
Mhm.
Um, getting like follow like seeing a giant X on the floor. It was like, okay, like I think I see what's going on here. I think we can make this work. Um, so yes, I would say the next step made sense. The following steps I would not have been able to do without the game guide though.
Oh, okay. All right. Um, when we use the X, that's when we wake up. Well, Nico wakes up again, and we are there. But as you said, we're unable to communicate effectively.
Yeah, he can't hear you. He's talking to you, and it's very sad because you're like, "I'm here, buddy. I'm still moving you around. I'm part of the game." But he can't hear you anymore. And it's just like you wake up in a black void, like there's no environment.
Mhm.
And if you wander around enough, eventually you find a computer that's hanging out in the void.
Yep.
And the computer has made it very clear that it's not trustworthy. It's
No.
like playing off the like you've been abandoned and like he can't hear you anymore and all this stuff. And I was like, "You dirty son of a bitch! I can't believe you're playing this game with me and my boy Nico. How dare you?" So well, I mean, emotionally, how were you feeling at this point in the game? Like I was like angry and very sad at this moment.
Absolutely. I was so like I get really emotionally invested in games, but I think this moment out of many, many games that I've played, I don't think I felt anger towards the game like I did right here, where I was literally holding my Switch yelling, like, I am right here. I am here, Nico. Oh my God. I was upset. I was frustrated. And the fact that yeah, this computer was just kind of saying all of these lies, uh, made me really upset, and the fact that they told us not to interfere, made me extremely worried for Nico at this point because I'm like, what's going to
Mhm.
happen now that I still kind of have control because I can still kind of like Nico can move around, but Nico can't hear me, and I don't know what's going to happen if Nico chooses to do something else. And this was actually the first moment I was curious, like, are we going to lose the ability to control Nico? Are we going to have Nico like take the reins because they think we're not there
Mhm.
anymore? Like all of these questions were coming up in my head. I was just mad, scared. I had a lot of feelings at this point.
This was also, another, like, religious moment for me, like, there's the whole, like
Mhm.
again, for people who don't have religious baggage, like, there's this moment in the Christ story and the Jesus story where he's, like, about to sacrifice himself, and in that moment, God abandons Jesus and, like, can't Jesus, like, can't talk to God anymore, he's like, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" Like that whole line comes from this moment. And so I was like, "Oh, is this a reference to that? That like
Wow.
a sacrifice is about to be made. Nico's about to take on the sins of the world, and so we are cut off because we can't be a part of that. But
Oh
that's
my
not really
gosh.
what happens. So like I think it felt
No.
like an important reference, but that's not. I don't think it was a direct. It didn't have the same direct religious references that I thought some of the other elements of this game have had.
Right. I think one of the things that I thought is a side note, to just like the sort of continued religious references that we've been seeing, just for listeners who maybe are just hopping in or unfamiliar, I am not a religious person, so it's nice having Joel here to like also provide that information, because like I did the thing where when I was a kid my mom put me into like Sunday school partially because of the community and the food,
Hmm.
less so because of the lesson she really wanted me to learn. And so it was Korean church. It was more about the social life than I think well, at least for us, it was more about the social aspect. Um, but one thing I looked up, because when you reopen the game, because the entity tells you to like back off and
Hmm.
the game closes, and so to reopen the game you actually have to click, there's the file with a black clover, which we know is a recurring symbol. And so I was like, what does a shamrock or a clover mean? Because I like, this is just too much
Ooh,
symbolism here. So
interesting.
I actually looked up a little bit about the clover or the shamrock.
Yes.
And one fact I found out, was when trying to convert the Irish to Christianity, St. Patrick referred to the three leaves of the shamrock as representing the Holy Trinity. So the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But in sort of outside of this religious and Christian context, the clover, in Ireland at least, was also said to just represent in general faith, hope, and love. And so, even if you take out, if you're like, I don't want to listen to the religious theorizing of the game, I want to take a different aspect of it,
Hmm.
there's still that element of like faith, hope, and love. This clover is an element of like Nico and some of the other characters in the game talking about faith in this God, us. Um,
Hmm.
and so I thought that was quite interesting, just as I was raging about the computer trying to kick us out. I was like, wait, but the shamrock must mean something. So that's what I found
Uh,
out.
can I rage about something else that is
Mhm.
perhaps writing or developer specific?
Yes.
Eventually, obviously, you will be able to reconnect and talk with Nico again. And when he's talking to
Yeah.
you, he's like, "Oh, you were gone," and your dialogue options there are like, "I never left you," and
Mhm.
maybe it's because of my own baggage, but like that is such a terrible thing to say to someone because it makes it feel like they didn't know that you were there and that's on them.
Mm.
And like, I did my
Mhm.
thing. I never left you. I was here the whole time. And it was one of those things where it's like literally two sentences of explanation would be reassuring and not not put the weight of that disconnect on Nico, which is how I feel like that response what it does. I feel like it puts the weight on
Yeah.
them that they didn't know. So I that's just
Yeah.
maybe it's like it hit something like a raw nerve for me, but that response really
Mm.
bothered me. It was like one of those like, oh well, there was footprints in the sand, and there were two footprints walking side by side, and then there was only one. It's like, well, that's where I carried you. It's like, well, I sure didn't feel very carried, bruh. Like, I don't know. It bothered me as a dialogue option, and
Mhm.
so that's where I felt frustrated with kind of maybe it was like the writing of the game felt frustrating to me because I felt like there was
Yeah.
a gentler response that would have been maybe more appropriate there.
I also felt conflicted about that response, partially because what I found conflicting a little bit, and I think it's because at the beginning there was sort of a setup where you could be kinder to Nico
Hmm.
versus not as kind, maybe more aloof as this
Hmm.
godlike entity. And it felt weird to me that we had one option that you could kind of read both ways. but didn't quite fit either persona that I wanted to
Mhm.
play, like, if I was
Yep.
playing. So I think, yeah, basically kind of what you were saying where it's like, you're not necessarily being kind or benevolent in that response completely because you are basically just being like, "Nah, bruh. Yeah, I carried you." Footsteps reference
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but if you were remaining aloof, I guess it kind of fits the aloofness a little bit more, but it was interesting because at the
Definitely.
very beginning of the game, there was a setup, and having just one dialogue option kind of, like, made me feel a little bit odd, just in terms of consistency across responses.
I totally agree, but I will give them this later on, and we'll get into this a bit here in a little
Yeah.
bit, but, like, I feel like the writing got so clever that I did something that I personally regret for how I played the game through the dialogue, which we'll get into it as we get further down the road, but,
Ooh.
that moment of reassurance comes, like, after you've kind of engaged with this obviously untrustworthy computer, um,
Right.
and so he's telling you to back off, like, he wants you to go away, and for me, it felt like the establishing of the what's the BBEG, the big bad evil guy, like, I felt
Mhm.
like, "Okay, so, like, I really have an antagonist now that I can, like, sink my teeth into and, like, set myself against," and that was kind of a
Yes.
cool feeling I felt.
Yeah. So when we finally kind of, before we have this moment with Nico, when we reconnect, there are these puzzles, like you said, and we are getting assistance from what I believe. I don't ever think it's clearly stated, but I believe it's the author, and we can see it because of the symbolism of the clover and the
Mhm.
pages of writing. And the author names this computer program the entity. And I think it's the first time we really like sort of see this as capitalized E entity in the game. And maybe
Mhm.
I'm blanking,
Mhm.
but um, we learn a lot of lore. We learn a lot of details about how this entity is something that's basically, like you said, our antagonist at this point. And we go through a series of puzzles which took me forever to figure out initially.
Don't
um
even get me
because you're taking another window, like you're the window with the black clover journal entries, overlaying it onto this gameplay screen and using that to Lost Woods in Zelda style, go through the go through the lost woods and find the
Mhm.
right direction to go.
Mhm.
Except I was a dingus, and sometimes I could not I like my brain just would reverse the direction,
It didn't
and
make
I was just
sense.
it sometimes I got confused, and I'm like, I know this is technically simple, like I get it, but also some of the drawings made me confused in a very weird way.
So I had a similar I was actually really frustrated by this puzzle for a couple of reasons. One
Mhm.
being I didn't realize until like the third step of this puzzle that there was writing on the like paper guide. So basically like you put that paper guide over the top of the map so you know where to go, and there's also a
Mhm.
handwritten note from presumably the author that's like
Right.
giving you more information about how the world got to be this way. And so I got to like the third turn off and I was like, oh, wait, shoot, there's something written on these pages. And I was like, I have clearly missed some important plot elements. So I had to restart just so that I could see the pages that I was missing. And it was like every time I made a turn and I read through the page, I would forget the mechanic. Like, am I supposed to go the opposite way
Oh,
of
yeah.
what's being shown on this map, or do I go to the way the map is actually pointing me? And it was so bad that eventually I literally started like Hansel and Gretel style, like writing down the arrow directions for how to like, okay, well this one reset me, so that's the wrong one, so that I could just be like
Mhm.
left, up, down, right, whatever it is. So hey, game journal came in handy, very practically for me to do this, but it was like
Perfect.
I don't know why it was so hard for me, but it was really hard.
I am, you are not alone. I was the same. Like, it's something about it. it was just weird because in theory I'm like I get the mechanic of it, but my brain after like the first couple had kind of a hard time computing. What helped me for any players who may be listening who are like, oh, any tips, like lining up the clover and was like the best tip for me. And then
Hmm.
once you get past the first couple pathway oriented ones, then the author starts highlighting doors, because as you climb the tower it becomes like more about focusing on what door to enter. That
Hmm.
made sense to me. It was just the
Yeah,
paths
same.
that got confusing. Oh my
Yes.
goodness.
Well, I was the exact same. I was the exact same. Question for you. I can't remember if this happened
Mhm.
right before this moment when you're talking with the computer or right after, but at one point you're talking with antagonist computer, the entity,
Yep.
and
Yep.
it says, "I can't go against my programming."
Yes.
Okay, what did you think about that? Because that to me was like a very small moment in dialogue that has huge repercussions. So I don't know if you
Yes.
want to get into that at all.
I would love to get into that. I think this goes into from the jump when we started playing the game, we met ProfitBot 2.0, or, ProfitBot revised edition. And ProfitBot said, like, beyond giving the prophecy to Nico, I can't go beyond my programming. I
Mhm,
don't need friends. I'm not going to go beyond my programming. That's not part of my
mhm.
programming. Um, the fact that we know the entity has programming and is designed to do something specifically, I think is hugely critical in determining its purpose. And it alerted to me the fact that motivations may not be evil necessarily. Because if you're programmed to do something, um, it removes this element of choice, except this is where I
Get
started
it.
thinking, I'm like,
Get get it.
except we know that robots can be tamed in this world. If you are programmed and you are given enough time, energy, whatever to be tamed, that you can divert from your programming. So then the question becomes, is this entity tamed? For me at least. Like, what is
Yes.
that?
And the author, I believe, on one of the journal pages writes something to the effect of they lost control. And so
Mhm.
to me, that implies that like the entity should be tamed, like it's operating outside of its programmed parameters, like it's not within control of the program anymore. But it
Mhm.
says that it is operating inside of its program. But it's if it's operating inside of its program and it can't deviate, that means it's not tamed and doesn't have free will. And so it's like I still don't have an answer to this question because, as we will discuss, the ending that I have chosen does not give me resolution to it. So, um,
Mhm.
yes, I'm very interested by this question. So yeah, I don't know if you had any like exploratory thoughts with this.
Um, Nothing more than I think what we've talked about. I think
Hmm.
just the question of like taming still is really, really relevant here. But then also, regardless of whether the entity is tamed or not, what is its programming in the first place? Because then we can actually start answering some of these other questions because we don't know exactly what the program was meant to do.
Hmm.
Kind of have an idea, maybe. Like the entity has been guiding us to guide Nico to the tower, but like what does that mean? And so I think finding out more about that and like really digging into what you think that's going to be about is probably key.
100%. So, I know that we need to get into like what actually happens when you get through this like doorway
Yes.
puzzle,
Yes.
because the experiences from this point forward can vary widely. And I should have texted you before I made some decisions, but I didn't. And
No, you
so,
shouldn't have texted me. Make the
oh, okay,
choice.
make the choice, Joel. You are God. You must choose for yourself. So I know before we get into some of those choice elements and how it changes the gameplay, I know that you have been doing a lot of exploration on this theme of taming, and I didn't know if
Mhm.
there were some things that you wanted to pull in here. Like, what have you been finding through your explorations?
Yes. So one of the links in last week's newsletter was to the Velveteen Rabbit. Um, so very early on when playing this game, and we were reading about taming, Silver, I think, was the one who mentioned taming and what makes something quote unquote kind of like tame versus not tame or programmed versus tamed. And it instantly, for really weirdly, because I have not thought about this tale in decades, like maybe since I was a child and I read it in elementary school. But it instantly brought me to the Velveteen Rabbit. Um, the Velveteen Rabbit is a story. Again, it's in the newsletter link. So if you wanted to go back to that newsletter and just check it out, it's for free. You could go to the library, check it out, or just you can Google it. But in this story, it is about a young boy who receives a stuffed rabbit that he cherishes over a long period of time. And this stuffed rabbit essentially is like, hey, because this boy loves me, I'm real. There's one day he is left outside and the bunny is encounters real rabbits, and the real rabbits kind of laugh and joke and like says, you're not a real rabbit. You can you play, can you jump like us? And so that casts a little bit of doubt into the stuffed rabbit's mind, but he goes back and he's with the boy for a few more years, cherished and loved. um Eventually, spoilers for a story that's 100 something years old. Eventually the boy, he gets sick, and because he gets fever and everything he has is contagious or has the contagions, all of his toys gets thrown out and sent to burn, in a big pile. But the stuffed rabbit somehow escapes, and a fairy in the woods casts a spell and turns him into a real rabbit finally. um but what struck me was this idea of real, to this rabbit, even when he was stuffed and just a toy, because of the love, time, and attention that the boy put in him. And that
Hmm.
immediately paralleled to me this concept of taming. And so I'm curious, and I'll leave it to you, Joel, since I thought about it. I presented it to you all. Did you see that connection? What did you think maybe when you revisited this story?
I uh so like that big climactic conversation around like what makes you real, like that someone loves you to the point that like even as you fall apart, like that just makes you more and more real. um what it brought me to is ultimately what informed my decisions with Nico, where it's like what
Mm.
I have is a real emotional connection to this little cat boy, and that connection is real. And so I'm going to treat this cat boy with care, as though its little game programming is a real boy that I'm going to take care of. And so it's a the story is really a perfect parallel for like my experience as a gamer and what makes something real. And how for me it's like it's not like I'm debating if this little cat boy has like consciousness and free thought and free will. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about his realness, and that realness to me. And for me,
Mhm.
where I find that reality is within my emotional connection to him. And so uh that's kind of how I engaged with that story and how I connected it. Were there additional kind of themes or like ways that it impacted you and how you experienced the game, or some of the choices you made?
Um, I mean, it absolutely impacted me. I think for me, it was quite similar where uh I've been thinking a lot about what makes this game so powerful to me,
Mm,
because on the surface it's like the pixel art, is cute but not out of this world.
sure.
The puzzles are fun, but they're cool with the meta, but they're not super complex or
Some were
overly,
clunky and yeah.
some are clunky. um the writing of the world is honestly fine, but the thing that keeps me so engaged and compelled by this game is the relationship you build with Nico, with this character.
Mhm,
And I think
mhm.
that's the core of this game, is that in playing One Shot, I think the people who are able to get the most out of this game are the ones that essentially make Nico real to them, who essentially tame Nico in their own way by investing that time and energy. And so it becomes this meta, extra meta moment of
Mhm.
like these robots in the game are talking about taming as we are doing the same thing with Nico. And folks who find this game a success are going to be the ones who invest in that concept the most, whether they are like
Ooh,
conscious of it or not. And I think the folks who maybe play this game and are thinking, oh, well, it's just okay, I think, which is valid, I think are
totally
the
fine,
folks who
yeah.
just didn't invest the time into taming. And that's also okay because, as we know, as we explore the refuge, some robots, you want to take the time to tame and some you don't. And so I think that for me is what made me realize like this is what makes this game stand out for me. And it's also why I was so emotionally distraught. It took me 15 minutes to make the decision.
Talk about the
Just
decision. Well,
under
I think
15 minutes.
let's get to it.
So once we get to the top of the tower, we have grabbed the light bulb again. We get into the elevator, and we know at this point that there is a decision that's going to have to be made. We know that either we restore the sun and the world is saved, ostensibly for a time. We don't know because we also have heard from so many folks the world is rotting regardless. But we know the world is saved, but Nico will be trapped and unable to go home. We also, conversely, could shatter the light bulb, shatter the sun, and Nico can go home, but we will have doomed the world. When you're going up that elevator, you have the opportunity before you make the choice to either tell Nico this or not. And I'm really curious what you chose to do with this information.
This is the moment that I was thinking, that I was referencing earlier, where the
Mhm.
writing is brilliant. The fact that they put that choice to you before the choice about whether or not you're going to doom this world is brilliant. And so much so that I regretted my decision as soon as I made it. I knew before I got onto the elevator that I was going to be sending Nico home. I'm going to doom this world and allow Nico to go home. I was like, this world got to where it is based on a series of decisions that people made, and this is the consequence of those decisions, and I'm not going to sacrifice a child's life in order to undo those consequences.
Mhm.
And so I knew that before getting into the elevator. Then in the elevator, it asks this unexpected question about whether or not you're going to tell Nico. And my first thought, my gut instinct was, well, of course I'm going to be honest because I hate it in stories when characters aren't honest for no good reason. And I told Nico. And as soon as
Mhm.
I clicked the button, I was like, oh my God, I should not have done that. I am telling a child that he needs to take an action and he has no choice. He's going to do what I tell him to do. And I'm going to tell him the consequences of that action, which he has no control over. And the consequences are the dooming of an entire world of people that he has met, that he has talked to, that he has interacted with. And so I started thinking, like, what happens when Nico goes home? And he's now burdened with the knowledge that these people are all going to die, essentially, is for my understanding in the game, because he broke the light bulb, which he doesn't have any control over.
Mm.
Like if he's in therapy 10 years from now, the therapist is gonna be like, now Nico, did you have control? Did you, if you had not wanted to break the light bulb, could you have done something different? No, I couldn't have, but it wouldn't change that emotional reality. And so I immediately regretted telling him that truth. It's like, if I am the god here and I'm the one who has control over the future of dooming or not dooming this world, I should have to
Mhm.
deal with the knowledge of that, not this child. And like, again, we come back to like what makes a character real. And like the second I clicked the button to tell him the truth, I was like, no. It was like that slow mo, like, no, like, stop, dialogue box, stop. So that was like a huge hats off to you for choosing this game. Like, the emotional feeling that I had here is like, I have done something that will emotionally scar a child. And like, I felt that, you know?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That
It's
I
like the
mean,
worst.
it it was
Oh
brilliant,
my
and, like, I
gosh.
didn't see it coming. I think we even talked a couple weeks ago, I was like, "Are they gonna make me choose between saving this world and saving this kid?" And you're like, "I don't know," and now I know they did, and I feel good about the choice I made. Mechanically, we need to talk about the consequences of that choice, but I feel good about the choice I made, but I feel terrible about telling Nico about that. I felt so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because yeah, I did the same, and I also was like, the ethics of, because I agree, I'm like, in pretty much now, like 99% of the situations, I'm like, tell the characters what's
Yeah,
going on.
yeah,
But I think this playthrough especially, we have always gone back to this idea of Nico is a child. Like, I have kind of imagined Nico as being 8 or 9 at most,
right, yeah,
honestly,
same.
with the way that they, like, talk about their mom, or that they talk about pancakes and being
Right,
so
yeah.
excited to help out with the other kids in the village. And so when they're like, when I told them the truth, I realized it solidified the choice that I'd make, and it was actually, I think, the opposite choice that you made, and that's why it took me 15 minutes, because I didn't wanna make it.
Ugh.
But I realized, for me at least, in opening the door and telling them the truth, once I got to the top of the tower, there's no way I could have shattered the bulb and left them with the guilt of not having saved an entire world. Like, in my head, I was thinking,
Mhm.
how would that have wrecked them? Like, that would have absolutely wrecked them. So, I wanted with all my heart to save Nico, but I realized, in them knowing exactly what was going on, I couldn't do that to them. It was kind of a Last of Us moment, honestly.
Oh,
um,
yes. What a
for
great
folks
parallel.
yeah, for folks who haven't seen it, I guess fast forward like 2 minutes. I'll try and keep this in 2 minutes, for a Last of Us spoiler. Um, for folks who have heard it, so Last of Us, at the very end of the first Last of Us, Joel has this opportunity essentially to take Ellie, uh, and save her, and he does. He takes her and saves her at the expense of potentially costing humanity the cure for the zombie apocalypse. And it was a Joel moment where I was like, do I save one that I love for the sake of everyone else? Do I
Mhm.
save everyone else because it's this quote unquote possible greater good? But then the kicker is, at the end with Last of Us, it's kind of a reverse. He has the opportunity to tell her the truth and he doesn't. And that's also what informed me, because in that show, Ellie is also kind of a child, I think. I think she's like 12,
Right. Yeah.
maybe 12 or
That
13.
sounds right.
And I always got so mad that he lied to her about that. And so that's also why I was like, I can't lie to Nico. But I'm like, wait, but Nico is like 9. Nico's elementary age. Like, we cannot. So yeah, I had a lot of conflicting feelings about
Well,
this.
and the
But I
the
guess,
characters, Ellie and Nico, are so drastically different. Like, even like,
yes.
yes, there's the age, but there's also like the amount, like the innocence therein. Like,
Mhm.
Ellie has had to kill people. Like Ellie sees the world as it truly is from beginning to
Yep.
end. And so I feel like there is a different amount of honesty that she could have borne, she could have dealt with because she sees the world as it is. And
Mhm.
it was Joel being a coward for keeping that from her.
Yeah.
That was how I read it, which is kind
Yep.
of the inverse of how I felt with Nico.
Yep. Yeah. So I guess we never fully like let you kind of walk through, but what was so from the elevator, what was
Mhm.
your journey like? What was your emotional roller coaster? Please do share.
You learn from the journal as you're like using that like clover puzzle thing. You learn like, oh, this choice is going to come to you. The
Mhm.
computer's going to say that like you should do this and you shouldn't listen to it. You should save the world, is what the journal essentially tells you to do. And the computer's like, no, obviously, like break the bulb, send the kid home. Like you can't do any good here. Nothing's going to get better anyway. And so I had come to my decision that I was going to be sending Nico home pretty much right away. Like that to me did not
Mhm.
feel like a hard decision. But as you actually go through it, speaking of playing video games as an adult, you go through, you give him he gets the choice, you tell Nico to do break the bulb. Nico goes home
Mhm.
and the game closes. You get your end credits, and you could stop there. And the what you have to do is if you want to try again, if you want to try and save the world, you have to delete your save file and
Mhm.
start the game again. There will be changes around the world. Nico
Mhm.
will know your name as soon as he wakes up. Uh there are mechanical differences in the world itself. Like the world has changed. So like the game is technically actually saving your data. It knows that you got to this point, that you made this decision, yada yada.
Mhm.
Um
Mhm.
but essentially you have to kind of replay the whole game with
Mhm.
Nico to get to what is called like the true ending, where you can save the world after sending Nico home. Um, Unfortunately, I didn't have time to replay the whole game. So like I got
Well,
to
and you
this
didn't
ending
have
point.
to.
Well,
You
I
I'll
feel
let you
like
finish.
so I guess yeah, the emotion that I have right now is the game feels unfinished. Like even though I saw the
Mhm.
credits roll, and a person could stop here, it does not feel like an ending to a game. It feels like you made a hard
Yes.
choice, the game is over, and or that's what it's supposed to feel like, I think. And I just don't have that sense of resolution, and especially knowing that so much of the environment changes on your second playthrough, it makes me feel like I actually I have to play it. I have to do this other run and I have to get to the end. It seems like they fast forward through some stuff in the second playthrough, which is cool. But that's kind of where I am right now. And I was like, Jenny, I didn't even get to the solstice. We're supposed to play the tower and the solstice. There's no solstice for
No,
me, and I'm not going to have time to get there. I
you're
felt so bad.
No, okay, this is why I was like, I should have texted you. So, just to clear this up, you are in the solstice. You are in the solstice run. And going back,
Oh.
you are there. So you are actually right on track. Um, what the original game did and why it was originally called OneShot is originally the game ended at the choice. There was no
Mm.
going back. There was no, hey, come back in, try a different run. Hey, things are going to be a little different. Wink, wink. It was, nope, the game is done. You made your one shot, you played your one choice, that was it. So the
Oh.
fact that you finished it and are now, they gave you the prompt where they're like, hey, if you want to try the world again, delete the file. Nico will remember your
Yeah.
name. Things are weird, huh? That's the solstice run. So this is something that was added, I believe, in like 2016.
Yeah, I think that
Let
sounds
me
about right.
look. Yeah, it was added basically when I'm looking this up right now. Uh it was added post launch. So don't worry if you have played it and you're like, wait, I don't get it. This feels so unfinished. This is your clue. Go back into go back into the game, open it. You're going to get a little bit of a hint to look into some of the folders of the game itself, and the author will have some directions for you. And it
And
was
to be
March
clear,
27th,
this is not telling
2017.
you to delete your like Switch game file. Do not do that.
No.
It is talking about like within the operating system of the game, there's a way to erase. So just
Yes.
if you're listening along, please do not delete your game file on your Switch or your Steam experience or wherever you're playing it.
Yeah, so yeah, definitely follow along with the game. Don't like totally wipe the game from the computer. I don't know if it'll save. I don't know on Switch. On Steam it may, but just follow the instructions that the author gives you. But yeah, this was a bonus chapter that was updated and launched March 27th, 2017. So,
2017.
um basically to get into this Solstice chapter, you're doing a new game plus essentially.
Mm.
But really quick, before we get into Solstice stuff, I'm curious, what did you get like an end credits visually? Like, or did it just
No,
stop the game?
no, it was an end credits. Like they went through all the people that made it, and well, I'm assuming they're the people who made it. Um, and I think you get like a shot of Nico back at home or something like that, like a single image or something, and
So
that
did
is
you see like
it.
the world ending, I guess?
I don't think so. Like you see flashes of the world, and I guess I just assumed it was flashes of the world. I did not interpret that as you watching the world end, but maybe I just misinterpret it, which is totally possible, as everyone who's listened to this podcast knows. Joel, you were watching the world end this whole time. No.
You were like, yeah, I'm curious because I did not shatter the bulb, and so when I finished the game, Nico was like sad, but said, "Hey, this is the right thing to do," and felt very like their dialogue was very certain of it. They're like, "No, you're right. This is what we need to do,"
Mhm.
and so we put the bulb up, and it was actually quite heartening to see some of the scenes. Like we got to see like basically all of the characters that you meet on the journey as they're looking up to see the sun. And so it was like this really lovely moment, even in the midst of realizing you've kind of trapped Nico there. But again, I was like, we still don't know if maybe there's another way to get Nico out. So, like, Nico isn't dead, just maybe trapped for a little longer. Uh, I will say, I am so happy that we're playing this with the Solstice ending available. If we did
Mm.
not have it, I would be absolutely distraught, honestly.
Oh.
I can't imagine having played this in like whenever it originally launched in like 2016 or 2014. I guess I should read a note. Valis did provide a small correction to the last podcast. So thank you, Valis. Valis said, small correction about the description of OneShot on the pod. It actually originally came out in 2014 as a free RPG Maker game. And this is important because it was one of the earlier games that implemented metafiction, so like putting documents on your computer, long before this idea became commonplace. And I also think that this was a small indie team, that it was a small indie team first implemented this idea and was done as a part of a free game. And so it was inspired
Mm.
by another revolutionary free indie game. So definitely want to shout out Valis for that pod correction. So
Yes.
I can't imagine playing this in 2014. It came out 2016 on Steam and having no Solstice ending. I think I would have been very upset. I was upset when I played because I actually didn't know about the Solstice ending the first time I played it, and
Oh.
I was just like, "What is even happening?" I cried so hard at this ending.
So is there after
Oh.
you choose to save the world and keep Nico, and he has this moment where he's like, "Oh, you made the right decision. It's okay." Do you get to see any more interactions with him throughout the world, or does it kind of jump to like, "Nope, the game's over now and here's your world coming back to life." Like what actually happens for you in your ending?
No, so that's kind of it. Nico, they just are there and they're
Mm.
just like, well, we did the right thing. And then it cuts to all of the cutscene of everyone like seeing the sun. And then the game just kind of ends. And there's I think you get like a room, you like get a blank room that's still dark, if I'm remembering correctly. Um, and when you close the game, and then you can like investigate when you reopen the game, like that's when everything happens exactly the same as you mentioned, where it's like you get
Mm.
a clue from the author, they're like, nope, the story isn't done. Um, and so what we'll do next week in sort of just one shot, just so that you have an opportunity to kind of get through it, is we're going to talk next week about the entire Solstice chapter, which is basically this quick DLC moment, where you are going through the game again, but it will be different. I promise. Don't worry. The first bit, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this is the exact same thing. We're going to have to do the remote controller again. Um, it very quickly changes into something I think that provides a lot of really interesting discussion, especially around some of what we started asking about the entity and sort of what is going on in this world as a whole.
That's very cool. I will tell you,
Yeah.
I was relieved as I was kind of reading through the playthrough guide to see some of the elements of the game that change in this like second run through kind of experience, because there were so many uh what I took to be Easter eggs as I was playing through, where it's like, oh, it looks like someone has kind of a plane being built here. I guess I'm going to ride a plane at some point. But then you finish the game and you're like, there was no plane. It didn't happen. I guess it was just an Easter egg that someone has a plane. And it's like, oh no. And the Solstice walkthrough, there's a plane that exists and you get to interact with it. And so it's like,
Some
there were
hints
a
for folks
lot of,
early.
yeah, there were just a lot of those moments where it was like, I guess here's my fundamental question. Those Solstice game elements, did they exist in the 2014 version? So, like the plane that you don't do anything with in your first run, did that plane exist in the 2014 version, or did that get added with the Solstice add on?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure, and I don't know if we can find like if there's a place where the original game can be downloaded.
Mm,
Probably somewhere on the internet it can be. But yeah, so for folks who haven't hopped into Solstice, this is the week to do it. Again, I think this is one of those games where also I was left unsatisfied by the one shot ending, but as I was talking to some folks and reading even online, there are folks who are just like, I wish it was just one shot. I wish we could have sat with our decision and not had anything else added,
yeah.
because there's impact to that. And so you can also just not play the rest of it. And if you wanted it to truly be one shot, go for it. I, for one, love the world so much. I'm hoping to see more. So I'm excited to delve into that lore with you all next week.
Yeah, there's just more to learn and experience, which is exciting. But like, obviously it was effective. The fact that this indie game in 2014 release, and like we're here talking about it uh literally 10 years later,
Hmm.
uh tells you how effective that initial release was, where it was a true one shot. You are left with the weight of your decision and there's no going back to like do anything different.
Hmm.
uh Obviously that was a very effective game choice. And so I'm like, I'm impressed that this exists. I understand the online perspective that like I wish it was a true one shot, because that's just like, it's so provocative. And like, even knowing that I get the opportunity now with Solstice to go and like try a different thing to get more of an ending, I felt the weight of my decision in that moment. And I
Hmm.
think, yeah, huge congratulations to the creators of this game, because that is hard to accomplish, like to make people feel that type of connection attachment.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, any last orders of business for us today, Jenny?
No, I think just in terms of playing for next week, how far to get, we are finishing the game next week. So just know that next week we're finishing the Solstice. So the DLC, the New
Solstice.
Game Plus. So if you're going to stay in the same sort of cadence that we are, make sure you finish it before the podcast goes live next Tuesday, to be able to listen into the final discussion and to the game announcement for next week. And that's it.
Excellent. As always, we appreciate your comments. We appreciate the discussion happening on Discord. There's a lot to dive in here. I'm really curious to hear about the emotional experiences that people had throughout this kind of tower experience. Uh, as you make your way through the solstice, uh, grab a cup of Joe, and may it be a much sweeter cup than the bitter ending of the one shot. Cheers. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. The Geeks and Grounds podcast is produced and edited by me, Jenny Wyndham. The logo is designed by Lee Thomas, and the intro-outro track is Children of the Ruins from the OneShot OST. Rate and review us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Blue Sky at Geeks and Grounds. Visit geeksandgrounds.com for direct links to our Discord community and newsletter sign up, and email questions, comments, thoughts, or feedback to jenny@geeksandgrounds.com. Thanks again for listening.